Good evening and welcome to the first ever Breakfast Show After Dark. I am your host, Mark Anthony, but most of you will probably know that. I'm going to say a very quick good evening to Gary Muirhead, who was first to join us, and Nick Drew is here as well. Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. I'm going to post something in the chat now. Just if anybody would like to join us on the show, you can certainly do that. You can become a guest, or a guest, and you can become a co-host as well. Speaking of co-hosts, we have one. We have a very special one, and he's not from around this way. I'm going to introduce him in just a second, but it's Al Grierson, all the way from Luxembourg, who should be packing to go off on his holidays tomorrow, but instead he's given up his evening to be here. So let's bring him on the show and see what Al is all about. Good evening, Al. How are you doing?
Good evening. How is everyone?
Yeah, not too bad at all. I tell you what, I'm going to throw this up on the screen just to get everybody chatting. Those are our main topics of conversation. Al, before we get any further, obviously everybody is sick to death of the sight of my face, but give people an idea of who you are and what it is that you do. Weird. Can you hear me, Al?
Maybe it's working now. I'm not entirely sure.
No, I can hear you, but I don't think anybody else can.
That's kind of bad. I can hear you, yeah.
Well, I just said, can you give yourself a very quick introduction, who you are and what you're about?
Oh dear. Well, I'm Alistair Grierson from Luxembourg, and I take pictures of diggers and video of diggers. I don't do this professionally. I'm not from the industry, but I teach in a Luxembourgish high school.
Fantastic. Fantastic stuff. I've just heard from Josh Johnson, who is a newcomer to one of these shows. He can hear you loud and clear, which is all good. Dan Cullen is here as well. Ken Hatter is here. Good evening, Ken. Could you change the title music? My family thought I was watching a low-budget adult movie. I've got to be honest, Tristan, that was precisely the look that we were going for. Or should I say the sound that we were going for. Let's get this banner rolling across the screen. For those of you that don't know, up until, we still do a Saturday social show whereby we just go live on a Saturday. There's no script, there's no agenda, there's no video. We just go live and see where the conversation takes us. We thought we'd mix it up a bit. First of all, we're going to do an evening show, which is the After Dark show that you're watching now. But also, we've got some suggested topics there. As you can see, scrolling across the bottom of the screen there. Competence cards. Are there too many? Are they too expensive? Are equipment manufacturers sufficiently transparent about fuel consumption and what have you? And construction's climate of fear. That's one I've got a real bugbear about. Get a lot of bullying on in and around the industry. If you've experienced it or if you know anything about it, we'd love to hear from you. And also, if you've got any topics that you would like to pursue, let us know. Mick Wright is here as well. Good evening, Mick. Good of you to join us. The only thing is, apparently, it's not dark. I thought 7 o'clock. Listen, by the time it's winter, it'll be midnight by now. Honestly, it really will. So, Al, what have you been up to today? There is a bit of a disconnect between here and Luxembourg, apparently.
I've been packing my bags to go on holiday, and I also been editing videos. I've got tons and tons of videos that I've not actually finished cutting yet.
That's fantastic stuff. If you're anything like me, I tend to build them up, much the same as Nick Drew does and the same as Peter Haddock does, build them up and then leak them out as we go along. So, yeah, I can understand that. And if you're going off on your holidays, I'm sure you're scheduling a few to land while you're out and about. So anybody would like to comment on competence cards, equipment manufacturer transparency, construction's climate of fear, or anything else? We'll kick off, I think, with this climate of fear. I know we've had lots and lots of comments over the past few months, well, pretty much since we started this show, from people that have experienced bullying. And we seem to have this weird double standard within the construction and demolition industry in the UK, whereby we have lots of people talking about the need to safeguard people's mental health and mental health awareness and mental health training and all of the things that go with it. And yet bullying still continues, despite the fact that the industry reportedly has or suffers more than 2 suicides per working day, which seems absolutely ludicrous. If anybody would like to pitch in on that one. The other one that's really, I think, got a few people heated now is on all things related to fuel consumption. Fuel consumption obviously is always a major cost for construction equipment, but at a time when the fuel price seems to have no ceiling, and it is probably the biggest cost facing equipment operators and owners, we need equipment manufacturers to be very, very transparent and open and honest about the actual fuel consumption rather than the suggested level of consumption. And obviously, Al, we've had a situation fairly recently with VW. Now, that wasn't entirely related to fuel consumption. It was related to emissions, where the mighty VW were being somewhat less than honest. My impression is we've got pretty much the same thing in the equipment manufacturing side of things as well.
Yeah, the fuel thing, or the software shutting down emissions control and using what's it called? Using or if it notices that it's on a test cycle, it would reduce emissions by a lot and so on. And it turns out that Volkswagen was a large culprit, but many other manufacturers did the same thing. And this is down to the fuel consumption test at the time, which is the NEDC, the New European Driving Cycle. I've got notes here. And the problem is it's very predictable, so you could instantly see that this is being tested rather than this is a car on the road. And all the manufacturers took advantage of that and made their cars really, really economical and also lowered emissions during the test cycle. But of course, in real world, they emitted like 8 times or 10 times as much.
What I find remarkable with that is the fact that we've now got obviously highly advanced telematics on a lot of these machines that we're talking about here. So yes, if a manufacturer, an equipment manufacturer, is being less than transparent with their facts and figures, that might get them the initial sale. But once that machine is actually out on site and it is doing working cycles and people can actually check an app or check a computer and see exactly what it's doing, that seems awfully short-sighted, because sooner or later you're going to have a phone call from a disgruntled customer saying, you promised me so many litres per hour and it's actually doing 3 times that amount. It just seems absolutely ludicrous to me. We've had a comment in from Tristan Mays. Let's I'll throw that one up. Let's talk competence cards, how they don't actually make you competent. I'm very pro CPCS. I'm very anti NPAWS, but I'm slowly struggling to defend CPCS. I struggled to, I mean, bearing in mind we have a teacher in our midst. Al, I'll throw this one over to you. If and I'm not entirely sure what age children that you are teaching, but somebody that emerges with what used to be called an O level here in the UK, I'm not entirely sure what they're called these days, but that if you emerged from a high school with an O level in maths, did not make you a mathematician. And yet we seem to have this idea of competence cards. You go and do your day, your 3-day, your 5-day training on an excavator, and there is this weird belief that actually makes you an operator. Not the truth at all.
No, well, I teach 14 to 19-year-olds, and of course, by the time they finish their studies, and by the time they finish their A-levels as well, they are not experts in the field. That's what university is for. But I'm guessing the competence card stuff is basically just an insurance thing. As long as the person on your machine has a competence card and then smashes something, you get money back.
But again, I keep coming back to this idea of short-sightedness. To my mind, that's awfully short-sighted as well. We are asking somebody to sit a 1, 3, 5, 10-day course to make them supposedly competent on an excavator or a crane in Tristram's case, and we're then expected to hand the keys of a machine that's worth 50,000, 100,000, £250,000, £1 million to somebody that's got a piece of plastic that says they sat on a simulator and then did a bit of a course. Doesn't seem right to me at all. I'm just going to throw this one up as well from Gary Muirhead. Fuel thefts are also on the rise. We had a guy on our site taking the diesel out of his digger for his car and was sacked despite being given £100 per week. Just on the subject of fuel theft, I'm going to give a very quick shout out to Chris Day over at Fuel Theft Solutions. Spoke to him today. I'm trying to think of a sensible way of saying this, but the silly bugger has managed to put his back out by trying to swat a wasp. So if there are fuel thefts rising at the moment, it's because one of the guys that's key in preventing it is laid up having put his back out. Just... you can't write this stuff, honestly. Kenneth Hatcher, my Toyota RAV hybrid, 8 miles per gallon better now. I've got the correct oil. Even the dealers use the wrong oil. God help the plant industry. Now, one of the things that I'm going to throw up on that, I know we've got our WhatsApp group, and if you'd like to join it, please drop me a line and I'll get you on that. But one of the things that came up in there is the fact that we've got, and this kind of plays to two different things here. We've got a couple of comments where we've had people actually putting Adblue in the diesel tank because they read on the instructions it was an Adblue machine and therefore they thought it ran on Adblue. So first of all, what does that tell you about the level of competence cards? But then the very fact that somebody was what we used to call taking the mickey out of them goes back to this idea of bullying. My eldest son, who is much more smart and switched on these days, but his first job straight out of school was at a local McDonald's, and as with all of these things, he was given the indoctrination of being sent to the stockroom to fetch back a box of steam. I laughed when he told me that he'd been asked to fetch a box of steam, but is that really the way we should be treating young people? Not so sure. Not so sure. Dan Cullen, in my opinion, both cars are equivalent. It's down to the operator if he's competent enough, and some don't understand the physics of power of the machine, never been near one in their life. On that basis, should they be going anywhere near a machine? And let's throw it over to you. You guys are the operators. I mean, I'm a journalist, Al is a teacher. We just sit here and talk about these things for a living. You guys are operators, and you'll be working alongside people that are quite possibly either loading right beside you. They could be loading into a machine that you're driving. What do you expect? What would you like to see rather than a CPCS, CSCS, CCDO, or another card beginning with a C? What would you prefer to see? What would you like as evidence of their competence? And should there be kind of an indoctrination, and I mean that in the nicest possible way, whereby the competence card gets them on the site, but they then have to go through some sort of work experience to knock off the rough edges? Would be delighted to hear. Mick has said, Mark, you know how long I've been in demo, still learn something new each day, and that was not by sitting on a course. Agree, there's something in place, but not a 2, 5, 10-day course. It is a sense of falsehood. You're absolutely right. Totally agree with that. I'm also 100% behind CPCS cards. I've heard horror stories about people paying money and a card being sent in the post. And on that subject, I've mentioned this recently, and it looked like Al was going to say something there. So, Al, were you about to say something then?
Sorry, I've got a delay again. In Germany, there's an apprenticeship scheme for plant operators. So you go to school and you spend 3 years going to school and doing practical work within a company. And that's definitely a better method because you've got time to learn the basics. You also get to understand how strong this machine is and so on. And you've got a mentor with you at all times. So you're actually working with an experienced operator as well. And you don't just get thrown into a random machine and told to manage.
It's interesting. Kind of mirrors what Tristan has just said there. In the crane industry, we have a factory induction that goes with the CPCS, which means we've also been trained by the manufacturer. One of the things I think that all of this misses is, as Alice just said, is mentorship. I think you can read an instruction manual. If you wanted to sit down and read an instruction manual, you could probably teach yourself how to operate an excavator, to make it go back and forth and to dig a hole and what have you. But that doesn't teach you the ways of a site. It doesn't teach you where to make sure the dump truck or the dumper is parked. It doesn't teach you about spatial awareness and that kind of thing. And I think that only comes with experience. So I have to say I like the crane idea, but I think there should be more. I think I think it plays to one of the things. I mean, we've got Mick in the chat here, and Mick, I'm not going to give away your age, Mick, but he's been around a while, as our friend Mick. And I'm just very conscious of the fact that we have people that are in the industry, been there, done that, got the T-shirt, and have, possibly clocked up 30, 40 years in the business, or possibly in the saddle as well. And then that all of that information, all of that experience, all of that expertise is just wasted. They retire and that information never sees the light of day again. And I honestly think somebody sitting beside, a Ken Hatcher or a Dan or a Tristan or a Mick for a day would probably learn more from that than they would from a 5-day course in a classroom. Yeah, and Dan has just said, get them to understand machine compatibility. Like to do a trial days on a site being watched by employers to be. Totally agree. Yeah, totally agree with that. I'm going to go back to that one. Adblue in the diesel tank is a Darwin award for sure. How do these people not walk in front of a bus? Well, good question. Yeah, very good question. I'm going to throw this one back up purely because it just reminded me of something that happened recently. Now, bearing in mind what it is that I do for a living, I basically bitch and moan about all things construction and demolition related. And we've had a situation recently where I was contacted via Instagram by a company offering basically illegal copy CPCS, CSCS, CCDO cards. It was reported, the powers that be finally, probably 2 months afterwards, finally caught up and did something about it. But they're still there. They're still there. So again, it throws back to this idea of just how good all of these card schemes really are, particularly if you can pop onto Instagram or Facebook. We all know where they are. Pop on there and just buy a card, turn up, show your card, and you are given access to the site. Now, I really, really, really wish I'd taken note of how to pronounce Peter's name this morning. Peter is from the mighty Kubelco. Good evening, Peter. Thank you for joining us again today. And you have somebody, not exactly a next door neighbour, but bearing in mind that our co-presenter tonight, Al Grierson, is actually heading for the Netherlands tomorrow. I'm sure your paths won't cross, but the Netherlands isn't that big. You never know.
Hey, we almost have the same flag.
Now, I don't know what you've just done to your system, but you are louder and we've lost the time difference as well. Right, so whatever it is you've done, keep doing that.
Well, it's wearing the silly headphones instead of the sleek ones.
I've got the little ones in. I'm no better than you. Let me see. Now, I'm going to go back to the other banner as well, just to remind myself of what the other topics of chat were. Yeah, climate of fear. Al, please.
I saw a video just this morning of a ground worker standing at a site, and then there's a digger next to him and gets a whole bucket of, I don't know what it is. It was either very liquid concrete or it was very muddy water, and pours it over him. And this video was filmed and put on TikTok, so there's a perfect example of bullying. And if you then looked at the comments, you had people, you had normal people who said, yeah, this guy should never be on a site again. And then you had other folks going, oh, don't be so mean, and, it's just a bit of fun or whatever. But I'm sure that the guy who got soaked did not think it was very fun.
No, and if it turns out it wasn't water, it was actually concrete, you're potentially burns to the skin as well. But I mean, one of the things that strikes me with that, I think I've seen the video that you're talking about, and there are lots. I mean, I've seen videos of people being nudged into muddy puddles and that kind of thing. For those to actually work on things like social media, so Instagram and TikTok and that kind of thing, somebody has set that up. So the operator that is actually tipping the bucket of water or the bucket of concrete on somebody's head or nudging them into a puddle has told somebody else. And rather than that somebody else saying, don't think that's a great idea, it's what about the guy it's happening to? They break out the phone and apparently that's all good. Just seems ludicrous to me.
Yeah.
We unfortunately, I think we do live in that social media age, and thank the Lord for social media, because frankly, without it, I wouldn't have a job. But it cuts both ways, and I've seen instances, particularly sort of during COVID, when there was a bit of a backlash about mask wearing and that kind of thing, where you have the police, police officers being attacked in the streets of London, and rather than going to their rescue and rather than phoning for backup or anything like that, people are literally reaching for their phone and I'll get that on film. That will go down a storm on YouTube. I think we may have gone a little bit too far there, people.
It's a cheap way of making money, and you can license those clips to media organizations who will jump on it like a bunch of vultures. So,
yeah, absolutely right. I mean, and again, God bless those media outlets that are willing to pay for our footage, because frankly, that helps put food on my family's table. But I am very selective about what I let them have, for that very reason. I still feel there's too many people out there waiting on someone to screw up, let's call it, and then laugh at them instead of taking them aside and show them where they're going wrong. I think you're absolutely right. And I'm obviously we're talking here about demolition and construction, but I think that is true in all walks of life. It does seem to be to point a laugh and accuse and berate rather than let me show you how this should be done. I'm not going to make a big song and dance about this, because it's a very different kettle of fish. But our friend Tristan Mays, who now runs cranehub.net, and if you're into cranes, go and have a look at that. Tristan phoned me up, must be 2 years ago, possibly even longer than that, and said, how do you do what it is that you do? I told him, it's no hardship, it's no skin off my nose. I mean, for a start, he works in a completely different industry sector to me anyway. But why would you not help somebody out like that? Rather than, you don't know how to live stream, you don't know how to film a YouTube video. What the hell's that about? Just give people a leg up. Makes perfect sense to me. This is all over Facebook as well, Mark. I talked to CPCS guys at Hillhead, gave them 4 names and numbers. Guy told me the same guys, just stop and start under a different name. Hard to keep on top of these people. Yeah, I'm sure that is the case.
It probably mobbed up, and it's just a side hustle for organized crime, and you just get a new website, new email address, and just keep doing it.
Yeah, well, funnily enough, I was working with Mick Norton on this. We had a bit of a dig around. There was one company that they were selling these fake cards out of Swindon here in the UK, but the company itself was registered in Israel, but the domain name was registered in America. So my guess is, if the office in Swindon was ever raided, you're not getting the people that are responsible. They are hundreds, if not thousands of miles away, tucked away, and they are as safe as houses. It's a bit like the drug trade. You never actually find the real drug barons on the streets. They're tucked away in their mansions, counting their money most of the time. One guy actually asked me if I knew people who wanted tickets. Don't speak English, do them for them, makes a fortune. Yeah, I'm sure that is the case. And unfortunately, I think that one really does cut both ways. Obviously, we have had an influx of migrant workers who are all too keen to work, and there are people that are all too keen to take advantage of them. So you end up with somebody buying a card, possibly in good faith, I'd like to think in good faith, that isn't actually what it says on the tin, but it will give them access to a site. And you then end up with an employer employing somebody that isn't trained, but has a very good card. So everybody loses, apart from the people making these spurious cards.
Yeah.
I removed these 4 guys from my groups too for reasons safety. Yeah, absolutely. Man's inhumanity to fellow man never ceases to amaze me. It's quite profound and deep for a Tuesday night, Nick. But I think you're absolutely right. I'm not going to dwell on this. Crane Hub is always in debt to you and Demolition News. You've been a great help. At the time, the crane industry actually came into the 21st century and made some awesome content. Well, they've come to the right place, Tristan, because you do make some awesome content. How many times has a joke gone wrong? And mucking about in a 21-ton machine is a disaster waiting in the wings. How true is that? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, certainly the one that I saw of the guy being nudged into a puddle, it was only a mini excavator. But you hit that lever a little bit too hard, and you're really going to injure that guy. And to what end? It makes no sense to me as well.
Or for clicks on social media, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, again, I mean, I'm bearing in mind, I mean, I don't know if you've had any of this, Al, but we've had videos taken down for questionable content in the past. And bizarrely, I've actually had videos taken down of controlled demolition implosions because I mentioned the word explosive, which is what it used. YouTube got very upset about that. Facebook got very upset about that. And yeah, so the systems are there to take down what they consider to be questionable content, and yet things like this, which are blatantly, not legit and potentially dangerous, apparently they are absolutely fine.
It's a keyword sniffer. The video is not being watched. It's just a keyword that someone says explosives, or there's explosives in a video description or whatever, or explosive demolition. It immediately gets taken down because of the gun restrictions, firearms, violence, whatever.
Absolutely. Well, unfortunately, because of when this show started, or not this show, because this is the start of this show, but when the Breakfast show started, it was at the height of the pandemic, and I made the mistake the first probably 15 or 20 shows. We can't produce our magazine because of COVID-19, and therefore we're going live. YouTube did not like reference to COVID-19 either, so they were all demonetized. We had a couple of those taken down as well. Seems like lunacy to me. I think there should be more cards checked before a site induction by site. It's not good enough just photocopying your card and sticking it in a folder. Absolutely. And I mean, bear in mind, we now have these. We have apps on people's phones that can check these cards. A lot of the cards now are smart. They have a chip within them. So not only are you checking the card, but you're actually checking the level of competence that the individual person has achieved. Dan Cullen, as we say, a machine in the wrong hands is a weapon. These people doing and being dangerous, unbelievable. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And again, it's like I keep repeating the same old thing here. You've got this strange double standard where you have our friend Steve Smith, a newcomer to the show, has just joined us. Evening, Steve. I'm so used to saying good morning. I do apologise. Yeah, we have all these training courses and this focus on all things health and safety, and yet things like this are allowed to happen now. And the other point with this, we've had cases that have been reported and prosecuted of health and safety breaches where a next door neighbour has filmed that on a smartphone and sent it to the HSE. We've also had prosecutions of people doing what is referred to as urban exploration. So they break into a demolition site overnight to get a photograph of themselves above the streets of London or up a crane or whatever it might be. And all of that is evidenced from a mobile phone or a camera video. So it's possible to catch the culprits. You can trace them by facial recognition. You can trace them by ISP and that kind of thing. And yet on-site bullying, do we know of anyone that's been prosecuted for on-site bullying that's been captured on TikTok or Instagram?
I think when they make it to LinkedIn or something and you get management sees this and realizes this is really, really bad publicity for them, then you'll see people getting fired for it. But otherwise, yeah, if it's not being filmed or if there's nothing recognizable in the video, yeah, they'll just be able to keep going.
Well, I mean, certainly the one that you referred to there, of the guy getting the bucket of water or concrete on his head, if I remember rightly, I mean, the company that was involved in that was clearly visible in that video. Clearly visible. I wish I could remember who it was. So you would have to think, somebody would have been hauled over. I'd like to think somebody would have been hauled over the coals over that. Face recognition definitely works. No, it absolutely does. I've seen it in action, and I've seen it both sides as well. I know for a fact that the police are very adept at using that, and I've seen that up close and personal. let me restate that. It wasn't me they were trying to recognise. It was I was talking to the police about plant theft and that kind of thing, and actually checking CCTV and that kind of thing. Bouygues UK have a safety system, all aspects. Not entirely sure what that is, but fair play to Bouygues UK. If you can tell me more about that, I'd love to hear about it. Bullying is a grey area, though, because it all depends on the person's level of being offended. Is it? Now, bearing in mind, Al, you're a teacher, but I'm the fact that all my kids are grown up now. But if one of your kids came home and said, "Dad, Tristan, I've been on site today and somebody's dumped a bucket of water on my head, or dumped some concrete on my head, or pushed me in a puddle with a mini excavator," level of offence? I know my personal feeling would be to jump in the car, pop round their house, and punch them on the ear, because that's not right. And even when you come down to things like, and I know there's a fine line. I realise that construction and demolition is a bit sweary, and I know there are certain expressions that are used in the industry as terms of endearment that will cause huge offence outside. But is that right? Are we not a bit more grown up than that now? Should we not be a bit more professional? And again, I'll go back to the opening point. You've got an industry that is talking openly now about mental health awareness. Should we not be taking that into account?
Shouldn't it always be the mantra? It needs to be among consenting adults, no matter what the context is.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I mean, we've had, this is a different kind of thing, but I've spoken to a female operator who for months on one site would turn up every working day to find somebody had stuck adult toys in the cab of her machine or in the female toilet. Who needs to go to work for that? You go to work, all of us, even me with my 13-step commute to sit in front of a computer. I go to work basically to provide for my family, to pay the bills, put food on the table. I don't do it to be abused. I'm big enough and ugly enough to take a bit of abuse, but I don't do that for that. So why should anyone else? And for the female operator with the adult toys, people that are being, particularly when you think about rookie operators or rookie operatives on a site, they've come straight out of school, straight out of college. By the time you're 16, particularly I think as a boy, by the time you're 16 years old, and Al, I'm sure you'll see this evidenced on a daily basis. By the time you're 16 years old, you think you are the bee's knees, you are the dog's doodahs, you are the big tough guy. You take that 16-year-old and put them on the average demolition construction site, and they may as well be 5 years old again. They will be the low man on the ladder. They will be abused and sworn at and told to fetch their box of steam and go to the builder's merchants for the long wait and stuff like that.
Left-handed screwdriver.
Left-handed screwdriver. I shouldn't be laughing. I'm trying to make a serious point here, but all of those things exist. Should they? Should we not be beyond that now? More people need to speak up without feeling there is a troublemaker or grass on site. It's too late. Seen it coming after something's happened. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, is one of the biggest things, is that fear of speaking up. I've mentioned this on the actual Breakfast show in the past. I spoke to a guy. He phoned me largely out of desperation, and people that phone me up usually are fairly desperate because they've got nothing better to do. But he phoned me up to say that he'd been on a site. He was still working on that site, demolition site in London, and he was aware of extensive drug use on that site, and he had taken it to his superiors, and his superiors basically told him to stop making trouble. And he thought, he said, I'll give it a couple of days, and if nothing's done, I'll go and see the site supervisor. He went to find the site supervisor, and the site supervisor was smoking weed with the very people that were doing the drugs on site.
Oh, it's incredibly stupid and dangerous at the same time. And
Exactly.
yeah, you need to find a new job at that point. I mean, are there enough openings in the UK? Can you switch easily?
At the moment, you certainly can. Yeah, at the moment, I mean, there are. Dan Cullen will back me up on that. I think people are falling over themselves to attract operators, and there is always another job down the line. You know, you could probably get the same money. You could probably get a bit more money as well. But how many times do you need to change jobs? You know, I mean, the number of people that have been sort of blackballed and blacklisted for speaking out, and this notion that they are a troublemaker because they've pointed out something unsafe, or in this case, open and very evident drug use. You're expected to work alongside people that is potentially, or people that are potentially impaired through drug use during the day. Madness. Depends on what you call bullying. What about banter? It's a good question. It is a good question, but at 57 years old, which I am, I know the difference. I mean, I wind my children up, 3 of whom still live at home. I wind them up all the time, but there's a fine line, and you don't go beyond that line. And I think, I think also if you're among friends, what you say among friends, consenting adults, as Al put it earlier, I think that's one thing. But to just lambast somebody for being a little bit less experienced than you are, and for being female, and all of the time this goes on, I say this time and time again, this female operator thing. We have an extensive skill shortage. We need to find in the next 10 years another, I think it was another 250,000 operators. We are, as an industry, continuing to alienate 51% of the UK population, because we basically make construction sites inhospitable to the fairer sex, which seems mad to me. Personally, I mean, I've worked in all male offices. I've worked in all female offices. I know where I'd rather be. Maybe I'm a little too in touch with my feminine side. People may have mentioned that in the past. I don't know. Tristan Mays, that's not bullying though. That's a sort of going back to the tipping the bucket of water on the head. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Some good plenty. We can't take it when turned around. It shouldn't even be turned around. We should be at the point where these things don't happen. Bullying and intimidation, no way in any form. Sites are bad enough and dangerous enough. You don't need somebody to feel bullied or intimidated losing the plot. No, you don't. You don't. And again, how do you go about actually doing a day's work? I mean, if you go to your school in Luxembourg and you turn up knowing full well that there is a member of staff or several members of staff that are going to abuse you all day, you're not looking forward to it, are you?
Yeah, you see that with pupils all the time. You've got pupils who get bullied, who don't want to go back, who get sick more often, and so on. And it's the hell on earth for them. And then once you confront the bullies, it's always, oh, we didn't know we were going too far, or whatever. But yeah, they do.
Yeah, I'm sure. Dan Cullen, abusing a female operator or a newbie is not good. I'm an avid person in getting and supporting ladies in construction, new people on sites. Yeah. Again, because I think it's because I'm kind of one step removed from the industry. I talk about it, but I'm not actually in it, and I tend to take a bit of an overview on these things. And the number of things that you look at and you think that just makes no sense. Every single construction company, every single demolition company in the UK at the moment is struggling to find decent workers, and yet we have an environment where women are mostly unwelcome. There are exceptions, and fair play to them, but they're largely unwelcome. Ethnic minorities, largely unwelcome. LGBTQ plus, I've lost track of where we are with all of that.
QIA plus.
Yeah, all of those, all of. If you were an openly gay man, would you choose a career in construction? My guess is you would run a bloody mile. And I wouldn't blame you one bit, because if anybody picked up on that, your life would be a living hell. I've mentioned this before. And I had one person contact me to say, I work in demolition and I am openly gay. One. It's like the Premiership football situation. We're honestly saying there's 2,000 Premiership footballers and not one of them is gay. Really?
Yeah.
Really?
In 2022.
Precisely. Problem is, companies won't give newbie a chance, so next big problem, and they want experience, and they absolutely. So how? Probably just press the wrong button. Bear with me. How are new people going to get work? Again, it goes back to that ridiculous situation that we have, where there is the need and the want on one hand, and then there's the environment on the other hand. No banter whatsoever. Do what you want. Have a bit of banter on your break. Take the work seriously. That's not a bad rule to live by. No, that's not a bad rule to live by. We had a drug and alcohol test on site one day. Now, to 40 staff, we lost 12, failed the test from project managers to groundworks.
I need to be more careful on sites. They don't get flattened by.
But you know, it does. You know, you've just made such a valid point. I won't dwell on it, but I had a demolition accident of my very own. I got hit in the head with a brick 5-6 years ago. And ever since then, I've been very cautious. You know, I tend to use the zoom on the lens or the zoom lens a little bit more. Very careful about where I stand. Where I was I was probably 15 meters outside a 20-meter exclusion zone. So I should have been safe. Freak accident, nobody to blame, so on down the line. But I'm now doubly cautious as a result of that. But what I don't take into account is the fact that the guy that's behind the levers of the machine I've gone to film, and I've been to film one today, might be off his head on drugs. I'd like to think that's not the case. I'd like to think that every operator I've ever filmed and photographed and spoken to is clean, sober, drug-free. Were they?
I've assumed this was the case until I read that, to be honest.
Yeah. I'm going to Underground, guys, to get trained to Euston and then home to Watford. So probably won't see the rest of the show, unfortunately. Great show. See you tomorrow. Take care, guys. Stay safe out there. Need a 2-hour show, Mark. Oh, please. I've been sat here since 6:30 this morning, you buggers. You have show a little humanity, for goodness sake. Sorry, guys. Catch us up. I'll set your shows and plan it out with a 24-hour clock. Fantastic. Thanks for being here, Steve. Anyway,
Right.
2-hour show. Yeah. Funnily enough, just before we get back to the actual topic of conversation, I have been talking about doing a marathon show at some point. I'd love to do like a 12-hour show, just to see if I could.
That's a challenge, yeah. I don't understand why anyone would want to see my face for 2 hours. So.
Hey, listen, I always thought the same, and yet they keep coming back. I don't know. I thought a few times in the last couple of years about trying to help youngsters in the game, but the way I came through the game, would it be right? So many woke people in health and safety. Again, I what I don't understand, bearing in mind the amount of investment that a construction company or a demolition company will have made in an individual like our friend Mick. They'll have sent him on lots and lots of training courses and, they'd have paid his wages for 20, 30, 40 years or whatever it might be. And then he retires. All of that investment is then gone. Whereas rather than sending, or as well as sending young operators off on training courses to get their little bit of plastic, send them for a couple of days with our man Mick, or people like Mick, to let him knock the rough edges on. And it may have been Mick that I was speaking to on one of the breakfast shows a while back. This idea of you're not just learning to operate a machine, you're learning to be a man or woman. You're learning to be a valued member of the team. There was somebody pointed out, I think it was Peter Haddock brought it to my attention. Nigel Williams, one of the operators that follows the show, was talking about the fact that he was working on a very dusty site, and part of his daily check, take the air filter out, knock it out, make sure it's dust free. very old school approach. It's the right approach, it's the old school approach. How many young operators are shown that? They are probably given the keys to a machine. There's the operator's manual. Do your thing. Whereas time with a Nigel or with a Mick, they'd have learnt that.
Yeah, because very often you're not just a lever puller. If you're an operator on the site, you also have to do other stuff, and you're responsible for other stuff. Or at least that's what it's like in Luxembourg, and you're doing more than just making the hole or leveling the ground or whatever. So yeah, you need proper support, proper mentoring, and so on, so that you understand every aspect of the job.
You're dead right. There is an expression, and I'm sure there is a Luxembourg equivalent to this, but you often hear, in reference to things like agency workers, people talking about, we need a warm body, we need a bum on a seat. That's not the idea. You know, why not have a decent operator, somebody that's been properly trained and mentored and can prove their capabilities? Because surely that just adds value all the way along. Do it for charity, Mark. I probably shouldn't have said this out loud, should I? How much coffee would you need for a 12-hour shift? A lot, and I would also need to be very, very close to the nearest loo. Because, see, here is a man that comes prepared. Here is a man that doesn't. Empty glass. And it did only have orange squash in it, I promise you. But yeah, I maybe I won't do it. One of these days I will do that. What I find weird with all of this talk about training and with bullying and all of the stuff that goes with it is this notion that you have projects like HS2 here in the UK, like Hinkley Point, like Crossrail, where we take the current level of health and safety and training and we extend it. And we extend it a long, long way. We really push the envelope. You would have thought that by now, having been through things like the Channel Tunnel, the London Olympics, Crossrail, HS2, Hinkley Point, and all of these, you would have thought that that would have shifted the line up. But it doesn't seem to. It seems to only affect the very upper echelons of the industry. And there is still that bit at the other end that just lags behind. It just seems lunacy to me. It also applies, I think, in terms of equipment. I know during the London 2012 Olympics, there was a lot of talk about machines having to be, at the time, they had to be, I think they tier 3 or something like that. So it was, at the time, it was a step forward in terms of environment. But there was also a big drive for all the plant hirers to fit their equipment with anti-theft devices and that kind of thing. All of which is a good idea. And yet, London 2012 came and went, and we all went back to doing precisely what we'd done before. And it's because I talk for a living. I've mentioned everything I say before. Virgin Media, who didn't let me down today, so thank you to them. Virgin Media installed Wi-Fi on all the London Underground trains for the duration of the London 2012 Olympics. Fantastic. It was an absolute joy. And when the London 2012 Olympics were over, they took it back out again because nobody wanted to pay for it. How crazy is that?
You see
how many? Sorry, I've gone.
Well, you see that a lot with equipment. Like you'll have your major construction and demolition companies, which will have the latest equipment. They'll have 3D machine control. They might even have intelligent machine control. You'll have tilt rotators and so on. But then when you go down to the smaller companies, people will still be rocking up with barely an automatic quick coupler.
Yeah. Well, that is certainly the case here. How many new operators know how to drain the water from a fuel filter at the end of every week, or just call the fitter when the machine cuts out? Dead right. And again, I mean, having worked what I do for a living, I worked up in Finland and Sweden in the winter. You know, those sort of things are a vital consideration. Much the same as we were saying earlier about Nigel Williams with the air filter. You know, if you're in a dusty site, and let's face it, all of the sites in the UK at the moment are dusty, you need to do these things. Nick Drew, we played our ice hockey for 12 hours raising money for the RTV telethon campaign. I did an all-night 10-pin bowling once for charity, and my right arm was basically ornamental for about 3 days after that. It just hung by my side. It was absolutely terrible. And this one will go down as my favourite. You see, here on even though this is only the pilot show, here on the Breakfast Show After Dark, we provide a public service. I've spent more time with you on your shows than I've spent with my 3 ex-wives. Maybe that's why they're ex-wives. If this is going to be a regular nightly thing, I may give up drinking for you. Mick, your liver will thank me personally for that. I do drain fuel filter on a Monday morning and clean the filter. Good to hear. Funnily enough, just as a very quick aside, on tomorrow's actual Breakfast show, the one at 10 o'clock in the morning, I've picked up a video from an American company who are offering sort of operator tips on how to operate and get the best productivity out of your machines. I'll be interested to see what our British operators make of those tips. I'm sure they'll be mightily impressed. Even Hill had Wi-Fi hotspots. It didn't have many. Funnily enough, I managed to find 2. There was one around the back of the MB Crusher stand, and there was one on the finning stand. Apart from that, it was a dead zone. It really was. Probably not many. And water and fuel, deadly in new common rail diesels. You're absolutely right. And again, I keep coming back to this double standard. You know, we've got ourselves in a situation now where we have machines that run on such fine margins. You know, they are so precisely engineered these days to meet emissions controls and that kind of thing. You would have thought that every single safety was put in place to make sure those machines were safeguarded, and things like, you know, care of filters, the right oil, that kind of thing. Surely that must be a key consideration. I'm going to say goodnight to Peter, who has been here all day. I don't suppose he's been here all day, but Peter, thank you very much indeed for being here. I will see you at Balmer. That's a promise. Ken Hatcher, yes, I drain mine weekly. Ken's tips, Nick. Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Don't dig over drive sprockets, or the drive motor, rather.
Yes, well, you well spotted, Al. You are speaking. Obviously, you are speaking to Mr. Sprocket right now, because Ken Hatcher is in the chat. But again, there's a couple of things that came out of this. One of the things that I did today, and it's part of the reason that I'm wearing this JCB hat, I actually went to film a JCB mini excavator 1.5 miles up the road from where I live. I even walked there, part of my new fitness regime, and I went up there to film it, taking care of some silt control in a nearby pond. So that's part of the reason I'm wearing the JCB hat. The other reason is so I can do that, because Al's in Luxembourg and I'm here in the UK, so that's the other reason for that. But 2 things that came up today. I actually filmed my entire video for tomorrow's Breakfast show with the JCB with my iPhone. Couldn't be bothered to charge the phone. Just did it on the off chance and did it with my iPhone. And man alive, it looks really, really good. So there is no excuse if you want to be one of the many people online posting videos of construction equipment. You only need a phone. You don't need anything particularly fancy. And the other point as well, I mentioned it this morning, and I will reach out to any young people that happen to be watching. The construction simulator game is fast approaching. 2nd of September, I think it lands, and you can, from the comfort of your own home, you can drive Caterpillar equipment, Liebherr equipment, Case equipment, Bomag, Doosan, and a whole host of others. Somebody should be setting up a channel for that. I'd love to volunteer for it myself, but I don't understand gaming at all.
That's your 24-hour Twitch charity stream sorted.
Hang on, it was 12, and I was worried about that. Nick Drew, Earth Movers Magazine, Digger Man, Ken's winter machinery tips. There you are. If you'd like to plan your machinery maintenance and care ahead of the winter, now you know exactly where to find it. I'm out. Take care, guys. Great show. Thank you very much indeed, Dan. Thank you very much indeed for that. Mr. Sprocket. Yeah, Mr. Sprocket. That I've said it before. Sprockets to the rear should be on a T-shirt, and it should be on Ken Hatcher's chest down in Welsh Wales. I think that's going to do us. That's an hour. That's an hour. Hang on a minute. There's another comment. Wonder how long it will be till NPAWS or CPCS use your time on construction sim towards your cards. Well, there is certainly in the piling industry. I know that the piling industry now has a simulator card. Doesn't allow you to just jump on a piling rig and start operating, but it does go towards your ultimate training and your ultimate qualification. I can see that coming. Certainly here in Demolition, we've had simulators for blimey 10, 15 years now. My worry with them, with any form of construction equipment, but specifically with Demolition, you can do a simulator test on a high reach excavator. As somebody, an ex-president of the NFDC once said to me, simulators are absolutely fine, but when you do something wrong on a simulator, you press start and start over. If you do it in the saddle of a real machine, somebody could die. So they're certainly not the ultimate answer, but I do think they are a contribution. Out of interest, how many of us checked slew level dipstick that was drummed into me each week? Good question. If anybody has an answer to that, I'd love to hear about it. Ken Hatcher said good night. Ken is probably off to eat pizza because Ken eats a lot of pizza. Have a fantastic holiday out and say hi to the donkeys.
Thanks.
How are the donkeys?
Donkeys are fine. They've been. We had a bit of rain yesterday, so they've been enjoying the weather a lot more than the heat before.
And somebody will ask, so I'm going to be that person. What happens to the donkeys when you're on your hollybobs?
My parents-in-law live just next door to us, so they'll be taking care of them anyway. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So if any animal welfare people out there, he is not just abandoning. It's Lily and Fritzl, isn't it?
Lily and Fritzy. Yeah.
Yeah. He is not abandoning them. They are in good hands. Not sure what that one was. And Mick, good night, mate. And your guest. My guest is Al. That way. No, that way. That way. I can never do that.
That way. Yeah.
See? It's all back to front. Pizza, just done an omelette on my new induction hob. See the fun these people have. Right.
A healthy choice.
Al, you have a holiday to go and prepare for.
Yeah.
I take it you're driving, are you?
Yeah, I'm driving.
What is that?
It's 4 hours.
4 hours. Right? Okay.
4 hours. Yeah. 4
okay.
Hours.
Well, you drive carefully. I really appreciate you being here tonight. Thank you
thanks for the invite. And
hey, listen, it's been great having a co-host on the first ever Breakfast show after dark. You can come back whenever you're ready.
I need to do some more work on being more hosty, I guess.
Hey, so do I. Fantastic first ever after dark show. Many more to come. Yes, there will. Yes, I'm committed now. Thanks very much indeed for that, Gary. Thanks to everyone that's taking part. Thanks in particular to Al for giving up his evening, because I guess it is, what is it? 9 o'clock where you are now? Yeah. So thank you for giving up the eve of your holiday. Have a great time in the Netherlands. Enjoy. And look at this. Nigel Williams has just popped up. We were talking about you, Nigel, but you've missed the show. Come back next time, and we'll get you on as one of the guests as well. But in the meantime, everybody have a great evening. Enjoy your holiday out, and I'll see you all very, very soon. In fact, I'll see you all tomorrow, 10 a.m. for the Breakfast show. Right. Thanks indeed for watching. All the best.
Bye.